Everybody all set? Good afternoon, good morning. I'm Sheriff Manuel Gonzalez III with the Bernalillo County Sheriff's Department. With me is Captain Nicholas Huffmeyer. He'll be doing the video presentation portion of our deputy-involved shooting. And we'll be covering our deputy-involved shooting that occurred on November 26th at approximately 2 p.m. So that day at the intersection of Montano and Edith, we had an unrelated call very close to there for a community taker at the Valero gas station. The reason I'm mentioning that is because one of our deputies that was there at the time is actually the person that took the shot that day during that event. So while he was there was other deputies in the area. When they were in the area, there was a hit and run that occurred at the intersection of Montano and Edith. A red Subaru had jumped the curb and struck several vehicles. One of our deputies went down there to find out from the victims what had occurred. They gave him a description of the vehicle, and one of the persons had mentioned it was a red Subaru wagon. And our deputy began to start attempting to locate that vehicle in that area. And so as he proceeded into the area, he eventually contacted or identified that vehicle and started trying to stop that vehicle. You'll see in the video that we'll have a little bit later, that vehicle ended up crashing on the intersection of Edith and Naconda Northeast on the southeast corner. After that vehicle crashed, our deputy came up behind that vehicle, and that person exited the vehicle, ran, came back to the vehicle, armed himself with a AR-15 style pistol, and also 3 firearms in a backpack, and then began to run eastbound on Naconda. Other deputies started to arrive at the scene. One of our deputies drove down eastbound on Naconda, stopped, exited his vehicle. I believe he gave that individual, who was identified as the driver, as Elijah Riche. He gave him commands to stop and drop the gun. The Deputy Ronald Perez, at least fired one time, striking that subject. Deputies on the scene began to render and give him medical attention. That person was transported to a local hospital and was pronounced dead. I'd like to offer my condolences to the family at this time. I'd also like everybody to know that all the information we provide in our presentation to you will be provided to the media. And Captain Huffmeyer will now do the presentation of the video. So I would hold off on any questions until after he's done, and we'll follow up to answer any of your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheriff. Good morning, everyone. So as the Sheriff provided kind of a 30,000-foot view of the incident, what we'd like to do this morning is drill down a little bit closer, provide you with some more specific details. We've got some graphical aids here for you, some satellite footage to show the location of the crash, the first crash scene, the second crash scene, and then we'll also be playing a combination of dispatch recording audio as well as body-worn camera footage and dash cam footage from a variety of cameras that were involved in the incident. So with that being said, as was mentioned earlier, on November 26th at approximately 2 p.m., some of our field deputies in the North Area Command were responding to a unrelated call at the Valero gas station in Edith and Montano Northeast. That's critical because the response time was instantaneous. Just by a matter of happenstance, those deputies were there at that intersection. The motor vehicle crash that we talked about earlier then took place. You see there in the graphic there. This is static surveillance footage taken from a local business. You see the vehicle kind of make an errant right-hand turn, cross over, strike those other vehicles. Deputy happened to be there and observe the crash. Attempts to then follow the red SUV as it goes south. Takes some evasive maneuvers through the next block down, comes back out onto Edith. And then that deputy proceeds to try to engage that vehicle with a traffic stop. Suspect vehicle crashes a second time. You can see now we're moving south on Edith from that initial crash location. The red car there on your screen, that denotes the suspect vehicle. He crashes a second time here into a local business, crashes through the fence pretty violently into some trailers. Those are some large dump trailers that he crashes into there at that corner. You see our deputy responding vehicle there, who's managed to locate him, attempts to engage with the suspect, and turns on his emergency equipment. He's giving him verbal commands. The suspect then exits, and you can see it. We're at quite a distance, and this camera's not as good as the other one. But we pause it just right there, Joseph, for a second. What you saw, and as the sheriff mentioned, you'll get the whole video, but I just want to touch on this before we move on to the rest of the video. The suspect gets out of the vehicle. He runs about 10 feet down from the vehicle. He stops, turns back around, and arms himself with weapons from the vehicle, and then starts running again. At that time, he's addressed immediately by the deputy. He's given commands to stop, drop the weapons. He yells something in the video that you can almost make out, and then he continues to run down Naconda to the east. So go ahead, we'll continue with the video then. Suspect exits the vehicle, as I mentioned, with the firearm, flees on foot. Deputy exits his patrol vehicle, gives commands. We'll go to the timeline. Instructs the individual to drop the gun. He doesn't do so. The suspect ignores those commands and as I mentioned, continues to run down the road with what appears to be a rifle in his hand and a backpack. An additional deputy arrives on scene, follows the suspect eastbound on Naconda. The suspect then turns around, having reached a fence, feels like he can't go any farther, turns around and starts running back in the direction of the initial responding deputy, while armed with the gun, running directly towards those deputies. That deputy then exits his patrol vehicle, gives repeated commands a second time now to drop the gun, stop, get on the ground, show me your hands. You'll hear all of those commands here in just a moment when we watch the video. As I mentioned, the deputy exits his patrol car, gives him commands. The suspect refuses to comply, and it's at that point that the shooting takes place. What you have on the screen now is kind of just a timeline breakdown, minute by minute, of the critical parts of the incident that happened, starting from about 1:47 that afternoon, with deputies being dispatched to that initial unrelated call at the Valero. And then you've got first deputy arrives on the scene of that call about 10 minutes later. 2 p.m., the 911 call comes in about the crash. That first deputy clears that initial unrelated call almost simultaneously to go and assist the responding deputy that happened to witness the crash and then follow the suspect vehicle, all the way down to shots being fired, call coming out over the radio at 2:02 p.m., and then paramedics arriving on scene at approximately 2:08 to transport the subject to the hospital. So what we'll move on to now, and before we play this, just to give you kind of a rundown of what you're about to see. So you're going to see a graphic on screen showing the dispatch audio recordings of the 911 call from the initial crash that happened. And then you're also going to hear some police car-to-car talk as the deputies are communicating with each other about the incident. Then after that, you're going to transition. There'll be an advisory on the screen to the body-worn camera footage. And I can't stress enough, viewer discretion is advised. Individuals who might be sensitive to that type of material, certainly young ones, it's not something that I would recommend that they watch. All right? So we'll go ahead and proceed with that.
Bernalillo County 911 with status of the PD with a transfer. Go ahead now.
Hi, we were in a car accident. Some guy just hit his head on, hit multiple cars in Edith and Montano.
Okay.
And a sheriff officer took off following him, but I think we need some attention over here.
Okay. And how many vehicles are involved?
I don't even know. There looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, maybe.
Okay. And so the deputy went following the person that left?
Yes. Because he was backing up and he hit multiple cars, and then I could see it in his face. He kept trying to move the car, but it looked pretty high or something.
What kind of vehicle was he in?
He looked like a red Subaru maybe, Outback. I think the cop got him. Look, there goes another cop.
Which way did he go?
He went, okay, let me see what direction are we sitting. We are headed north. He was headed south on Edith. It looks like two sheriffs just went.
Thomas was 10-4. He was then on his way. He was showing me 10. Did you say maybe 10-4 over there?
Oh, 10-4, head this way.
Subject 313.
133. Here, there's another report.
We're going to interrupt to Edith at Montano for a 45 run.
My gun, please, shots fired. We're at 51, 54 here, hard here, 23. We've got one subject still on the ground. We need 40 to 55 to stand by. Another subject in a field SUV all down with a 1080.
That's what Edith said that way. The senator.
So what's 20?
61 before Edith.
35 Southern, so you can go ahead and answer that call as well. 284, same traffic. 360, so we need 40 to 55 now, so we got 1 mil down for gunshot. It's scene secured.
10 foot. Right there in Yap County.
We had one of the witnesses in a silver SUV that was on. I'll try and track them down. At this point, I don't believe we have anyone outstanding.
Get on the ground! Get on the ground!
You're gonna get over there?
10-4, head this way. Put the gun down! Put it down now! Put it down! Put the gun down! Put the gun down! Put the gun down! Stop right there! 101 SO, shots fired. Turn around! Turn around now! Turn around! Show me your hands right now! Show me your hands right now! Hey, I need help over here, you guys! Keep your hands where we can see them, man! Stop right there, or you're gonna be shot again! Don't reach for that gun! Do not reach for that gun!
So clearly a pretty dynamic situation. I think the video speaks for itself there. On screen now you see a picture of the decedent. That is Mr. Riche. Born June 21st, 2003, is 18 at the time. The photo of the firearm is the rifle that he's seen carrying in his hand in the video. Multiple frames, you can see the rifle very clearly as he's running with it. You can also see it when he gets it out of the car and runs from the initial deputy giving him commands to drop it. That is, sorry, can you go back? It's commonly referred to as a pistol, AR-15. Go ahead. You also probably noted in the video he's carrying a backpack. That was one of the other items that he retrieved from the vehicle when he first started running. The backpack was recovered on scene, as a matter of the normal course of the crime scene processing team that comes in and secures and processes all of that evidence. Those additional firearms, there's a 10mm pistol, a .40 caliber pistol, and then another AR style pistol, this one chambered in 9mm. Inside of the vehicle he left a fifth firearm, and you can see it down there, it's black. It might blend in just slightly, just because of the distance that you are from the screen, but there's a black shotgun there, kind of resting over into the floorboard of the passenger's front side of the vehicle. Again, so a total of 5 firearms, 4 of which recovered directly from the decedent. Go ahead. As it was mentioned, this is Deputy Ronald Pettis. He's been with our agency for 10 years and 1 month, and this is his first deputy-involved shooting. So that concludes the kind of the video presentation. As was mentioned earlier, you'll be provided with the video in its totality, and you're free to view and release that as you see fit. One thing that we wanted to mention about all of these investigations, they're very standardized. It is still currently ongoing, so there's some information that is either unknown at the time, depending on what kind of questions you may have, but we feel like we've done a pretty good job of providing in detail everything that we know up to this point. We think that the video speaks for itself, but again, it's not the job of our agency to determine the legality of the shooting necessarily. Once the criminal investigation is completed by the Metro Area Task Force Shoot Team, that information gets turned over to the District Attorney's Office, and they'll make that determination. Our job is to collect the information and then provide it to them. Of course, we'll also be doing an internal administrative review of policies, etc. That will come once the criminal investigation is concluded. So with that being said, I'm sure there will be some questions. I'll do my absolute best to answer them. But please understand there's some things that I may just not know the answer to. All right?
So Deputy Perez was the one taking the call at the Valero? Is
That's
that right?
That's correct.
And what was that call?
It was an indecent exposure call, possibly a transient or homeless person that a bystander had called in and indicated that they were exposing themselves to the public. That's my understanding of the call.
And then the crash happens and the one deputy responds and then Perez follows.
So more than likely that initial call would have been a 2-deputy response. So the initial deputy got there, the second deputy is on his way there, that's why he happens to be at that intersection. And then the crash happens right in front of him. The other deputy indicates that he's 10-4, he's about to clear that call. And so the priority then in terms of a response is, well, I've got a crash that just happened right in front of me. And you can see the deputy kind of does a loop through to do a cursory check to see if there's any significant injuries with the crash. Once he realizes that's not the case, he goes to try to locate the offender vehicle.
And then Perez follows after that.
Right, so he clears that initial scene, and you're talking, a couple minutes, very, very rapid succession. The initial deputy who witnesses the crash locates the vehicle, attempts to conduct a traffic stop, he's giving commands, and then it's within seconds, you could see where we cut the video, he's giving him commands, the suspect's maybe 30 yards down the street, and that happens in 3-4 seconds. Any other questions? Did I answer everything?
Yeah, I think so. Sorry, just to be clear, just to make sure I get this right.
Sure.
So the indecent exposure call would have been a 2-person call, so that's why the second deputy was
Possibly. I mean, I don't know exactly how they coded the call in dispatch, but my experience with having been on those types of calls is you don't know the mental state of an individual on a call like that, so more than likely we would send that as a 2-person call. More than likely.
Where did the guns come from? Do you know if he owned them legally, if they still...
That's one of those questions. We talked about that in our command staff briefing. The investigators are still researching that. Anything else? If there's no questions, that means I must have done a pretty good job of answering everything up front.
There to the video, it's hard for me to see. Did the subject with the firearm, did he actually make a turn? I couldn't quite see it. I don't know if you guys could see it through your...
Make a turn in what direction?
Toward the deputy, because it looked like he was running away, he was pursuing.
So in the video, what you see is, and you guys can go back and I've watched it many times.
Sure.
He's running and he reaches a fence, and chances are he's got some some tunnel vision, and he feels like I'm guessing he can't go any further, so he stops and turns and begins to run back towards those initial deputies at the corner of Edith and Nakanda. The responding deputy then stops his vehicle and gets out to engage him. From what I see on the video, it looks like he stays running directly towards those other deputies. So as far as turning, it doesn't look like he turns back. He's just running straight at those other deputies while he's armed with the rifle.
Okay, and then those other 2 deputies, they have the lapel camera on too, or dash?
Yes, they did.
At least small. I think the other one, I don't know if the other one was activated at the time.
There's footage from those lapel cams that'll be included in what you're provided.
Okay. So he was, and I know it's still under investigation, this will be determined by the district attorney, obviously, but so his concern at that point was what he was going to do to his fellow colleagues that he was running to. Is that correct?
The best answer I can give you to that is I think that's a great assumption. but I can't speak for the deputy that pulled the trigger. So his statement that was provided to the investigators will be a part of that case file, and once that's completed, I mean, you're free to IPRA that, and you can see exactly what he said in his own words. So I think I'd be doing injustice to him by trying to assert what he thought.
Sure, I just was trying to put it in context, obviously, because his back's turned, it might not be clear to a viewer.
I mean, I think it's pretty clear that he thought that his fellow deputies were in danger.
Perfect, thank you.
Did the suspect fire the gun or point the gun at any point? Or point the gun at the deputies?
I mean, aside from running straight at the deputies while he's armed with the gun, I mean, yeah, I don't know. He didn't fire it to my knowledge, no.
Have you done criminal background on him yet? Do we know anything about his history?
You know, he's young. So as an adult, he didn't have any history, and his juvenile record is sealed, although there is one. So we're not able to provide that information.
Do you have any information about why he was involved in the crash, why he was fleeing, anything to...
We do have some preliminary information. Establishing motive in these things is difficult, you know, especially he's not able to be interviewed. We do know that he might have been involved in some kind of a domestic incident earlier that day, but as to what role that played in his actions that you saw on screen, I can't say.
They did what they felt they were trained at the time, and we'll have to wait this thing out because it's still in the preliminary stages of the investigation. I don't want to give you any of my thoughts because I'm not here to give my opinion. We're here to figure out the facts of the case and give a complete investigation and a prudent investigation over to the district attorney, and all those things can be looked at the district attorney's office.
Shooting aside, the fact there was a guy out there with an AR-15 and 2 handguns.
It's yeah, we're in a time where when I was growing up, you didn't see that, and it just boggles my mind that that sometimes somebody 18 years old is running through the streets of Albuquerque in the middle of the day. And I guess there was another incident that I'm not totally privy to, but that the Albuquerque Police Department may have handled with the same type of Subaru a couple days earlier, and the possibility that that person was involved in a road rage incident. So again, we're in the preliminary stages of this investigation.
Thank you all very much for coming. We appreciate it. Again, once the investigation's concluded, I'm sure you guys will request a copy of that report. Some of those questions you guys asked, great questions. I'm just not able to speak about them, but I think you'll get some clarity when that comes out, okay?
Thank you.
All right.